Okay, I think this is about close enough. So if you will, stand with me, please. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Dr. Charlie if he will to lead us in prayer tonight.
Lord, we come to you and just ask for your wisdom and guidance tonight as we take care of the business of this college and its stakeholders. Give us the wisdom to ask the right questions and understand the answers and make good decisions. Just be with those that are ill and unable to be with us, and all of those that the school touches that are involved in the illness now. Just put your healing hand on them. These things we ask. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Charlie. Before we go into the business tonight, I want to introduce Dr. David Gibson.
Mr. David Gibson.
And Information Technology Director. And we certainly look forward to a long working relationship with you.
Thanks.
Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I'm just thrilled to be here. Excited to work with the IT staff. I've been very impressed with their enthusiasm, their dedication to school, and their skill sets. And so I think we're looking forward to doing great things for Trinity Valley.
Thank you. All right, we have 6 board members in present tonight, which is, constitutes a quorum. And we have one, Steve Grant, he's coming in by Zoom. And then we have our president, Dr. Jerry King, he's coming in by Zoom. And so we're just about ready to take off and have a great meeting. The item that you saw on your agenda about Representative Keith Bell making presentation tonight, that has been postponed until March board meeting. We felt like with all the virus situation that we got going on, that it would be best if we didn't have that many folks to come in tonight. And so Keith was very agreeable to move it to March. Okay, Kevin? Okay, we'll move to item number 3. Consider the annual audit report presented by Kevin Cashin, a Global Morgan Petty accounting firm. So you have the floor.
All right,
Kevin.
thank you, sir. Thank you, board, for allowing me to be here tonight. You have in front of you a copy of the report. I hope everyone has that. They can look along with you tonight. I believe you were given this last week in your packet. So I do want to just hit on a few highlights tonight, just kind of touch on some things, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions. Before I get started, I want to thank David, Stephanie, the whole staff that we work with here for their hard work in helping us put this report together for everything they do for us. You have great staff here, and we appreciate all their help in doing our audit each year. If you'll turn to page 3 and 4. Actually, towards the bottom of page 3 is where you'll find our opinion. And I state this to you every year that we talk about this. The financial statements for Trinity Valley are the responsibility of you, the board, that is charged with governance and your management team. We have basically been hired to render an opinion on these financial statements. And the opinion that's presented on page 3 is considered to be an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. It is the same opinion that we've rendered each year that we've been associated with the college. And this is the highest opinion we can render on the financial statements of the college. Now, one of the things I love about community college reports, it gives you a lot of comparative information. It's not like some other governmental entities that just focuses on one year. So I do want to just touch on a few things tonight with you. If you'll flip over to page 13, exhibit 1. Some of the key things, of course, that happened during the fiscal year ending 8/31/21, of course, we all know this was kind of the follow-up year to COVID, which began, the pandemic began back in March of 20. of course, it's carried out through 2020 and into 21, and guess what? We're still dealing with it today in some shape, form, or fashion. So again, the college was very fortunate to receive a lot of funding through COVID, through the HERF funds that came through. That's the Higher Education Emergency Relief Funds. That's kind of what is, that's the new version of COVID that came out in fiscal year 21. So some of the things you're going to see here are kind of a resemblance of that and what you were able to do with funds. If you look at Exhibit 1, some of the key changes, you'll see your cash and equivalents. Cash and cash equivalents, the current asset went from 5.6 million the previous year to 6.095 million. Again, I'm on page 13, Exhibit 1, if you want to kind of follow along. One of the big changes you saw during the year was, if you look at your investments, we'll look at a detail here in a minute, they went from 9.8 million to 17.9 million during the year. Also, one of the capital assets, some of the changes, if you'll just kind of bear with me, let's flip over to page 26. This is in your footnotes. Okay, if you look at the table that's on page 26, that kind of shows you a change in your fixed assets or your capital assets for the year. The biggest changes were in your construction in progress. You'll see that we reduced that by 15.5 million, and that's captured in the additions of the buildings of 13.7 and some of the equipment there on 2.5 million there. Most of that deals with the completion of the Terrell Health Science Center. That went into service kind of towards the tail end of the previous fiscal year, but it went into the service really at the beginning of fiscal year 21. So that's what you see, a big change there. So that project was completed. If you look over to page 27, you'll see the two ongoing projects you had at the end of 21, the parking lot there at the Health Science Center, and then a remodel in your northwest dorm. You'll see there you had about $331,000 in cost incurred on those two projects. And you can see the estimated amounts remaining to be completed, which should be completed in the current fiscal year that we're in. Okay, any questions on that? All right, again, as I go through this, if you have anything, please stop me and we'll discuss it. Going back to page 13 at Exhibit 1 again. One of the other key things you were able to do with some of the funding you received during the past year was you paid off your bonds. If you look over at the 2020 column, you'll see there was a current portion of your bonds, 1.2, and a long-term portion of 2.4, total of 3.6 million. That was all paid off in fiscal year 21. So you'll see that's why you see in the 21 column, you no longer have any bonded debt. So that's a great thing to be able to accomplish that, again, with some of the monies you received in fiscal year 21. You'll see your net pension liability did not change a great deal. It actually dropped a little bit from 9.6 to 9.4. Your OPEB liability, or your post-employment benefit liability, dropped some from 29.5 to $28.5 million. You ended the year with a total net position of $38,785,943. Okay. Flip over a couple more pages to page 15. And we'll kind of address some of the changes that took about from the previous 2 years. On your tuition and fees, you'll see there that this is a little deceiving, and I'm going to explain why. You'll see it went from 4.9 million to 7.8. If you'll flip back to Schedule A, and you're probably asking, you may have looked at that and asked yourself the question, well, our enrollment was down, so how did our tuition go up? Well, I'm going to explain that. Flip over to Schedule A on page 52, because this gives you a little clearer picture of what really happened. If you look at Schedule A, you'll see there your tuition and fees. You'll see the total, go out to the very far right of that schedule. You'll see the totals for your total tuition, your total fees. You'll see your tuition went down actually from 5.6 to 5 million. And then your fees went from 9.293 down to 9.170 million. So a slight drop off, which again was what was expected due to the drop in enrollment. Now, the reason the net side of it has gone up is because due to your funding that came through with your Title IV funds between 2020 and 2021, you have to show that net of those discounts that's been paid by Title IV funding. And so you actually had less Title IV funding in 21 than you had in 20. Thus, there's less amount to discount against that tuition and fees. That's why it shows that's a little bit more on Exhibit 2. So that's a little bit deceiving. But again, that's the way the code board requires you to present your tuition and fees as net of that discounting your Title IV funding that you received to pay that, which the bulk of that money is the Pell money that comes through. Does that make a little better sense? Hopefully it does. So back on Exhibit 2, looking at your total revenues, the other significant change there is the federal grants and contracts went from 2.4 million to 6.7. Again, that's where a lot of that HERF money shows up. Okay. Your total operating expenses went down from 52.5 to 48.6. Again, a lot of that drop was just the conservative approach that you took in order to keep your costs down with all the change and all the things that went on when your enrollment dropped. And then you got to also understand part of that was paid, those costs were paid from those HERF funds, monies that went out to students, monies that were used for institutional support. A lot of those dollars were able to be used in that as well. So you were able to pay for some of those costs that you normally have to pay for through tuition and fees with some of those HERF monies that came through. A big change you see under non-operating revenues and expenses, of course, is your property taxes. As you're well aware, the increase in values in your district has allowed your property tax revenues to go up considerably. The drop in federal revenue, as I mentioned previously, due to the timing received of Title IV money. You had some outstanding gifts the previous year that you did not have in fiscal year 21. Again, those are a lot of monies that came in that went towards your Health Science Center in Terrell. So if you compare it all the way down, you'll see in the previous year, we did have an increase in that position of 6.878 million compared to an increase of 8.4 million in fiscal year 21. So again, did very well in making good use of the monies you got from the federal government. Any questions on that? Okay. The other thing I wanted to address with you tonight is back in the back. We go back to our single audit section. And I'm not going to read through all this. I'll just kind of give you a brief summary. If you go back, of course, we go back to, 2 years ago. You had about 14 findings related to the compliance work we did on your financial aid department. The previous year, last year, fiscal year 20, you had 3. This year you had 3 as well. And it's good to know that 2 of the previous year's findings were corrected. You did have 1 repeat finding that followed into fiscal year 21, and then 2 new findings that we came about. There was only 1 finding that specifically related to what we call question cost, and that was just a little over $3,000. The other 2 findings were specifically compliance-related areas that did not have any bearing on your funding or anything on the cost side. So there's no question cost involved. You just had compliance issues. These were all found to be what we consider significant deficiencies. They did not rise to the level of material weakness and controls over your compliance with your federal grants. So that's great to know. But that's kind of the summary of that. If you get to page 74, that's where you're going to find your corrective action plan that your management team has drawn up in order to relate to those findings and how those things are going to be dealt with in the current fiscal year. I hope you've read through that. If not, please do so. I think, again, we've read through this, looked at it. We feel that they're very well documented. Your staff is aware of what the findings were and how they're going to get dealt with in the current year. Any questions on that? Any questions on anything that we've discussed tonight, or anything else that you would like to bring to my attention?
Is there anything that we have risk of clawback from all this spending money?
The HERF funds that you received?
Yeah.
No. It's like a lot of the monies they gave away, you got it. Be honest with you, they really, if you go back 2 years ago with the monies you got under the COVID grant relief money, there was very little as far as requirements on that. David can attest to that. They didn't give you a lot of guidelines on how to spend that money. They were a little more forthcoming with the requirements with the HERF money, but again, there's a lot of liberty in how to use the fund. So, but there's not going to be anything that they'll come back on you on saying, hey, we want some of that money back. So you're very good. And I do believe you're still getting some funds in this current fiscal year related to lost revenues.
We still have some left over. And our intention is that of the 4 million that I'll talk about, we intend to ask for an extension to cover the second year of the lost contact hours. $1.6 million a year, as y'all recall, they cut us back because of the COVID. We've got this year covered. Next year we'll run slightly short, but there's a long time between now and the end of August, but we have about $4 million still from the last batch.
Very good question. Anything else? I do want to say I appreciate y'all 110%. Y'all been wonderful to work with. We appreciate the relationship we have with everyone here, your management team. Everybody's been great to work with. Thanks to Dr. King as well. We spent I guess it was the previous Friday. I came over and spent time in detail going through this with Stephanie and David and Dr. King, and appreciate their comments and everything. And again, we just appreciate the opportunity to work with y'all.
David, do you have anything you want to say before we ask for?
No, I think Tammy and Tanya's staff, they did a good job taking care of the single audit stuff. And we appreciate Kevin's folks because they're a big help to us as well. You look at an audit, it's how to make us better. It's not just a piece of paper. So we appreciate Kevin and his bunch.
Okay. All right, if there's no other comments, questions, or anything, do I hear a motion that we approve the jury makes a motion, Terry seconds the motion that we approve the annual financial report. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank y'all. Thanks, Steve. Thank y'all very much.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed he was gracious in passing off, the improvements to the assistance of Goller, Morgan, and Petty, and I realize they have been a big help to us. But I'd like to acknowledge David Hopkins coming on board, and I think in his first year there were several things that were out there that were of material concern, and I realize David didn't do it by himself, but certainly he kept the team going in the right direction, and I just believe he deserves a particular commendation for that. Feel good about him being where he is.
Thank you for those words, David. I know David Hobson likes to hear that kind of stuff. All right. At this time, we'll move to the president's report. Dr. Jury.
And Ryan, I try to tell him that all the time. I know they do a great job over there, and David and his staff and Stephanie, they've done a really good job, and they do a good job every day. I'm going to let Dr. Spizzera, I'm not sure how much of a voice I've got. I'm going to let Dr. Spizzera give you an update on the spring semester. I think she's available there.
So Board, where we're at right now.
Kristen?
Yes, sir. Where we are current enrollment from last spring 21 to spring 22, we're 2% down. We're still registering students. We have a few students who were doing reinstatements after they were dropped for non-payment. And then we're also still registering for 8-week 2. So that 2%, it's a small amount that we'll look at potentially making up Couple of things I want to point out. We are actually 0.22% down in contact hour funding. So we saw an increase in our dual credit embedded workforce classes, which have higher contact hours, which has helped kind of narrow that gap. We also, just to remind everyone, in March of 2022, so when we start 8-week cycle and then our second cycle for the TDCJ vocational, it's when our new contact year starts. So for contact hour funding, every enrollment that we have from 8-week 2 back through next spring of 2023 will be what our contact hour funding will be based off of for the next 2 years. Anyone have any questions or?
Compare that to the last biennium funding. How does that stack up as a percentage or something?
We're still down. I'm gonna say probably about 15%.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of our students come back, even in our face-to-face classes. We're seeing that shift from online to face-to-face, but we're not back to our pre-COVID numbers yet.
Okay, and again, this is preliminary information, and once we get a firm amount for the spring semester, after enrollment's completed, we'll give you that information a little bit on down the road. I also wanted to mention, and I put this on the agenda, and I think you've probably seen this on some of the updates that I've provided, but as you know, the cheer team has been on the Netflix series Cheer, and we're getting a lot of positive publicity out of that. And I just wanted you to be aware of that. I don't know if you're interested in watching it or not. I've watched it. I would recommend possibly moving on into the second season, into 7, 8, and 9 episodes, but that's where it really talks more about TVCC. But it's been a very positive thing for us so far. It's given us a positive for our college as well as our cheer team and coaches and et cetera. So I'm proud of that. I also wanted to mention the fact that the election has already started. Filing date started on February the 18th, and the deadline for that will be, I believe it is February the 18th, I believe, or 19th. It's something around that time frame. And we have District 6, 7, and 9 that are open this time for elections. So wanted to mention that, and that's all I've got, Ray. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Just one, Dr. King, and of course it gets so close when it's you, but obviously COVID is still very much with us in whatever variant happens to be the flavor of the week. But can you just kind of summarize where we are with that now? I mean, you know, the impact, we see your updates, et cetera, weekly, but to just kind of round it out for us briefly and sort of where you're thinking going, kind of where your trigger points are, or getting close to any of those, just kind of what you think about the whole picture.
Well, we're working on a day-to-day basis right now, just like we basically did back here 20 months ago. I found out today from, I think, Dr. Reed, I'm not sure if she's on the Zoom call or not, that we have 80 faculty, staff, and students that have tested positive since school started last week. And so we're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. It's creating a staffing issue for us in some areas. For example, today we had to limit the number of hours that we were available in the Learning Resource Center on the Athens campus. It doesn't seem to be having as much of an impact on faculty as it is on staff. And that's where we have several people in one office area. In terms of instruction, all of our classes are being offered both face-to-face. All of our academic classes are being offered face-to-face as well as online opportunity, Zoom opportunity, other types of remote opportunity. So our students have a choice. If they want to do the remote environment, they can do that, or they can be there in class in person. And we're doing that with all of our classes. We did that early on to make sure that we were covering ourselves. I'm not sure exactly if that's, we're just making it decisions. We're having a little bit of a difficulty with, we're more worried and concerned and challenge probably with the students living in dorms. We've known that from the very beginning. We're trying to be as careful as we possibly can and as safe as we possibly can, but we understand we're going to have positive cases, and we're going to have places where, and we do have places for them to be quarantined if that's the case. So I guess I'm not sure if I'm answering your question 100% or not, but in terms of what we're doing, let me just say this as well. It's a lot worse right now than it ever has been in terms of having to deal with, in terms of absences, in terms of staff being out. We've never had it to this extreme as we have it right now. And so, again, we're trying to make it, I realize that some of the ISDs are closing, and they have closed over the last few weeks, primarily because of staffing shortages, but also because of COVID for the students. So, David, to answer your question, we're just dealing with it on a day-to-day basis and trying to make decisions as we go along.
The best you can do.
Dr. Parnell may have something to add to that. I know Dr. Parnell, do you have anything you'd like to add? He's dealing with it quite a bit as well.
We're tracking the student numbers every day. And on Monday of last week, we had a total of 10 students who were either quarantined because they'd been around someone else who had it, or they had it themselves. And by the end of the week, we were over 50. And now sometimes when we have a longer weekend like we had, that allows it to calm down a little bit. So I expect this week to ramp up again, and we'll see what happens. But I know in my own area, student services, I think last week at the end of the week, we had 12, which is about a fifth of the employees in the whole service area. So we had 12 employees that were out. For instance, right now I have 3 police officers out of our 7 who were off with COVID. And up until today, our admissions area only had 1 person in it. Today we got 2 people back, and we lost another in the same area. So it is day to day. And I worry that we're going to get to the point where certain offices may have to close because they simply don't have the people, or they only have 1 person left. And if that person gets it, then the operation, then they have to stop the contact. So we're looking at all that.
It seems consistent with about every company and other body, out there with employees.
But we know at some point everyone will get this. We would just like to slow it down so they get it with a few people at a time at this point.
And I'll say from the instruction standpoint, it really hasn't impacted faculty as much because they learned last year how to modify and accommodate for the students. So even if they get sick themselves, most of them have videos that they're ready to go live with. They're recording their classes for their students. And like Dr. King said, they're giving students the option, if they're sick, they can stay home virtually live and not get behind on their instruction. So they're really working with the students to make sure that instruction continues on.
It's a good plan.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jerry, for a
Thank
good
you.
report.
Thank
All
you.
right, we'll move to item number 5. Consider the minutes of the November the 22nd and December the 14th of 2021 board meetings. Do I hear? Mike makes a motion to approve those. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Jerry seconds the motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. All opposed, like sign, motion carries. Item number 6, consider the business financial investment report for October and November of 2021. David?
Yes, sir. More of what we'll be talking about tonight is the November financials. I want to point out at the end of those, you have a December preliminary. We don't have done any comparison. Some things I wanted to point out, you notice on tuition and fees, you see a drop of only 0.9%. If you look at what I sent you for October, it was 3.1. The reason you see that difference is the spring semester opened for enrollment in November. So by the time you get to the end of the month, you kind of got a hybrid between the semesters. So we don't quite have the comparison that we would have because those don't necessarily open at the same time every year. Registration may or may not go like that, but I think that by the time the spring is over, we'll have a better picture. But I did want to point out that if you look at October, it's pretty close to what Kristen was talking about 3%. You know, we were hoping it would go back to pre-2019, but we're not there yet. The good news is that if you look at housing, food service, and bookstore, they're all up. We've got more people in housing, the food service, more revenues coming in. Bookstore revenue is up. I did want to, while it was on my mind, Dr. King mentioned cheer. Beth Ann opened the bookstore on Martin Luther King when they had a cheer camp here. She sold $4,800 in one day. They flooded the place.
It's a big deal.
Which they're taking pictures of the coaches and all that kind of stuff. But the point being is that we're trying to be prepared for if this does produce sales. Beth Ann's trying to be ready for it, but not be, you know, go crazy and buy $2 million worth of stuff. We're not going to do that, but we are trying to be acknowledge the fact that we may have an opportunity there. So I just want to give kudos to Beth Ann for coming in on holiday and making the bookstore some money. So the other thing I want to point out, state appropriations, that is no surprise. We just talked about that. We're expecting 1.6 million. That's a locked in number, so that's going to be down. Nothing really on payroll and other benefits. You see a big difference of 128,000. That's the prior year we had the Christmas money that y'all distributed. Y'all were kind enough to give the employees that we didn't do this year, so that's a difference. In repair and maintenance, next page. Of course, you see some some expenses going up there. Travel, you see going up. Equipment, we've got some equipment purchases. I'm going to talk to y'all next month about a couple of ones that were supply chain issues that we received this year. In services, you see a big increase. That's to be expected because one of the big ones is dining service payments are up 103,000. But that's because you see the revenue increase on the side we just talked about. So those are correlated, obviously. The other difference in services is we paid for Bruce Field this year in the normal time frame. Last year, we didn't use it until the spring, so Randy didn't bill me until the spring. So that's the difference in services. The other big difference, obviously, is we didn't make a bond payment this year. And you go down to the bottom, revenue over expense is 4.3. This year, last year, it was 3.5. Again, one of those big differences, obviously, the bottom line bond payment. Anybody have any questions on that? Next page is your investments. And I'll go through these three pretty quickly. It's more or less the same numbers. 17.2 million in cap reserve and a little over 5 in unrestricted, or excuse me, restricted in operating cash. The monthly investment report, the next page. And this is one thing I did want to point out. It's kind of a cash flow statement if y'all ever seen one. You see all those CDs. We, at one point during the year, we split the money up into CDs of 17,235. And on a cash flow, sometimes it looks like, well, your cash went down, but one of those things that you do with it is use it to buy investments. Your money's fine. It's just, that's the way a cash flow statement works. I just want to point that out, is that's what caused that, is all those CDs being purchased. On the capital reserve activity, the big item that we had was the HSC parking lot. We also had some engineering fees that we reconciled to. I think we had one transfer that we did backwards, so we had to correct that down at the bottom. So it reconciles to that 17,237,000. The next page, I want to give you a chance to see both October and November payments over 25,000. If there's anything on October that y'all had any questions about. And the next page will be November. One on there I would point out is obviously the integrity contractors for 41637. That's Captain's item. I want to talk briefly the next page about the HERF funds just real quickly. We've got, this is the summary that one of my staff does, one of Stephanie's folks. We still got 4.6 million available in HERF. A little over 5 million student. We're in the process of distributing that this week. So pretty quickly that will be all distributed. On the next page, one of the things I wanted to talk about kind of in relation to the audit. The next page would be kind of a summary of the expenses. And you notice we're on the lost revenue. I took a tack this year because I was a little worried about it. That's what, Dr. Reisinger, I appreciate your question, because one of the things you don't anticipate when we draw down the revenue by semester, when you get to the end of the year and we're looking at closing the books, when you start making journal entries, that affects your revenue from the first semester where you've already drawn the money down. So what we did is, for the summer revenue, we trued it up. We looked at the actual lost revenue after all the audit adjustments and everything. And so we only drew down for summer what was left, basically. So if they come in and looked at that lost revenue, it doesn't matter if you had all 3 semesters, it all ties to the net loss at the end of the year. One of the things they allow you to do is do it by semester or by year. I kind of took a hybrid approach because I was afraid, I didn't want to get caught up in, well, you drew this money down, then in August you made a correction to it and you drew down too much. So we accounted for all those entries at the end of the year to guard against that. Is that clear as mud? I know everybody loves talking about HERF money. The next page, kind of looking forward a little bit. This is the 4.6 we've got left. All the things that you see, you see all that draw, that's all the semesters, things for this last year. We've drawn all those down. That money is out of this number. The next page, as y'all recall in the budget, what we're hoping is that would be what we would draw down this year. At this point, it's looking like we're a little bit behind that because, the loss isn't exactly equal to last year. Of course, we've got a lot of year to go yet. So again, taking the approach that I just described, I'm going to be conservative and, not use any more, even if it is by semester, than I have to. And going through year 22-23, of covering everything through 22-23. Of course, a lot of things can happen between now and then. So we really, that's kind of a long projection. I think that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions on that? I think that's all, Mr. Chief.
Okay, your recommendation is to approve it then
Yes, sir.
as presented. Did I hear a motion to approve it as presented?
I so move.
Terry makes that motion. David seconds that motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. All opposed, like sign, motion carries. Item number 7, consider annual investment report. David?
Board, this is something the state auditor's office requires. This is their form. I just take the numbers and put them in their format. We're required to put this on our website and to send the state auditor's office a link to it. And one of the many regulatory things we have to do, recommend that the board approve it as presented.
You need a motion?
Yes.
I make a motion.
Okay, Dr. Charlie makes a motion. David seconds motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign, motion carries. Item number 8, consider and discuss Board of Trustees for District 4 vacancy. We have always in the past, it's been our practice in the past to always ask the directors around that precinct to serve on a committee to interview and make recommendations back to the board. So I'm going to name a committee tonight, if it's all right with you, and it's going to be Ron Day, Jerry Stone, and Ray Raymond. We circle that. So if that's all right with everybody, that committee will do their work starting in February and select a person for precinct 4. That all right with everybody?
Right, you have to have a motion.
A motion to accept
I'll
that.
make a motion to accept that.
Okay, motion. Who made the motion?
Charlie.
Dr. Charlie made the motion. Max seconds the motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign, motion carries.
But there will be a process for people to apply,
Yes.
right, just like we did before, correct?
It will be done exactly like it was before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Janine says that the 19th of February is a deadline for submitting it.
That's for the elections.
Okay, but for this one here,
Yeah, I haven't discussed with Dr. King as to what the timeline is that he wants to have for this vacancy. That's treated a little bit differently. It's not on the same timeline.
We've got as much time as it takes.
Yes. Right.
okay,
I think the last time with Dr. Eaton, I think we had.
That's right.
so I suppose there's a possibility
It can take, it can
we
take-
might have a candidate to submit at the February board meeting. If not, it'll go over into March.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, it can go as long as you want it to.
it would be open, there's a number of us have relationships out in that area, so it would be open to communicate with you guys on the committee.
Yeah,
Et cetera.
yeah, you bet, yeah. We'll just be the nucleus. of
Right,
the
if I
meeting.
can just make a comment,
And
Right. Can I make a
anytime we have,
comment?
David, anytime we have a meeting, we'll certainly
He can
notify you
be-
that we're having that meeting.
Jerry wants to make a comment, right? Jerry wants to say something.
Okay, Jerry?
yeah, right. If it's okay, I'd like to this will be done exactly like the last one was. There'll be a 3-person committee. We'll advertise it in the newspaper. We'll ask for resumes. We'll provide those resumes to the board committee. The board committee will meet with each one of the individuals that are interested in the position, and then they'll make a recommendation. That could take 3 months. It could take 4 months. It could take however long it needs to take.
And the reason I'm addressing that is that there's actually 2 things. It's one, so that the process allows to make sure that if there's someone who's willing or may be, that we can get them identified. And I know we took with Homer Norville's post, and the time was well spent.
Yeah.
Considering Dr. Eason coming.
You hoping we do better this time? Is that what-
I'm trying to be diplomatic. Jerry helped me out. So,
Okay.
that's one thing, just to be sure that awareness is there. And then secondly, there's a little bit of care required that if a committee presents a single recommendation, then that's just an up or down, yea or nay. And my understanding, at least, and I'm not trying to lawyer the thing, is that if a committee functionally becomes the decision maker, then open meetings, et cetera, can apply. And not that anyone cares who happens to be sitting there. That's not the point. It's just that we haven't traditionally been subject to that. So I just think it would be good to be sure that that's open. And what you outlined, Dr. King, actually, I thought this last process was probably the very best that we have.
Right.
Okay. So, and the notices will go out in the paper next week about both elections, about the election and about the appointment.
Well,
No.
the election
No, no.
information is already out there on our website. But tonight you guys are deciding on to go ahead and put the vacancy out there, and we will promote that through the same avenues that we did with District 9. We'll put it in the newspapers, and we'll put a deadline as to, for everybody to submit their applications, or I mean, their resumes, and then we'll present those to you guys, and you guys take it from there.
All right, number 8, consider and discuss business of, number 9, consider and discuss TVCC Board of Trustee policy manual. It might be,
Ray and I talked,
did we talk about postponing this?
yeah, Ray and I, we did. Ray and I talked about this, and I think you got a pretty good picture of in the memo that I sent in terms of what we want to do, but there's really no hurry to do this. So I'd like to wait to the February board meeting, give you an opportunity to look at it again, give you an opportunity to read what I sent out in terms of the potential changes, and then talk about it at the February board meeting.
All right,
So we need a motion to table.
okay, do I hear a motion? We're
I'll make
table.
a motion.
Jerry makes that motion. Dr. Charlie seconds that motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay, number 10, review and approve investment policy strategy. David?
Yes, sir. Board, this is just annual requirement. I apologize. I thought we had done it in May. We did not. That was legal. This is the local. There are no changes. I'm not recommending any. The Public Funds Investment Act requires that we bring it to you regardless. So recommend approval with no changes.
I'll make that motion.
All right, Dr. Charlie makes a motion. David, you second motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. All
Aye.
opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item number 11, consider and discuss TVCC Board of Trustee redistricting plan. Janine.
Board, I know that Dr. King sent you guys out a draft map C, labeled draft map C. And that is the recommendation that we were wanting you guys to approve for the redistricting. There was a request made by Trustee Day to change some of the outline in his area. And so we made that request with the demographer, and they were able to make those changes. And then we also had a request from Kaufman County to change some of the lines in Kaufman County just to better align with the voter districts in the county. And it didn't make a very significant impact to make those changes, but what it does do is by doing that, it'll actually save the college money whenever we do go to do an election, because it's easier for them to choose those specific districts if our district aligns with it, and so they don't have to split any of their districts, which would cost us more money in order to perform an election. So we're kind of trying to work in unison with the election administrators to get all that kind of tied in. It obviously didn't all work out, to be perfectly aligned, but we did the very best that we could. And also stay within the guidelines from the government that we have to stay within that 10% difference.
So you recommend approval?
I recommend that we approve draft C and that we move forward and get this ball rolling.
Just curious, if I could, Janine, why was Plan C preferable to A and B?
So A was the original draft that we came up with. B was additional draft that we came up with with working with Henderson County's election administrator and getting the districts more in line with Henderson County's voter registration district. And then C came along when Trustee Day had a recommendation that he wanted for his area. He wanted to include more of Maybank, the city of Maybank, in his district, and also to align the districts in Kaufman. We got Kaufman's information after we did the draft B. And so draft C is an accumulation of all of it.
Thanks. Looks good.
So whoever makes the motion on your desk is circled how to make the motion. Everybody has a copy of that on your desk.
We have lawyers helping us.
David, you will make a motion?
Yes,
Just read that.
I move that the board approve the resolution adopting single-member districts.
That's what Janine, isn't that what we need to do, Janine?
That's what this one says.
That's what they sent.
Yes. To approve the
And draft C needs to be included in that motion.
Yeah,
Yes.
probably does.
I wrote it on
As
there.
referenced in draft C.
Mhm.
Mackenzie,
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Mackenzie Walters
Yes, ma'am.
with Sarah Leon and Associates. Just thought I could help out a little bit here. Right now, all we got to do is approve that resolution. That resolution adopts this draft C as your final map. It also sets your the date that this is going to be go into place. So it'll go into place immediately in effect for your May 2022 election. And then also it adds that you're going to all serve the remainder of your terms as you normally would and be, so that nothing is going to change there with your terms or with our upcoming election in May. So I did not include a map as an exhibit in the document when I sent it to you because I was not sure which one would be your final choice. Now that you have an exhibit C, or your draft map C is what you're going to be adopting, we will follow up with a finalized map and the shape files as well that you can share with your election officials. This is going to include extra detailed information that they can use with special software for whenever they're drawing up their elections and their boundaries and looking at all of that. Does that help?
yeah, so for tonight, they need to approve the resolution for the
Draft C.
redistricting plan.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what.
My
So,
motion stands.
We need a
Okay, Dr. Charlie, or David, you read the motion, yeah. David made the motion, Max seconded the motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item number 12, consider and approve request to contract with financial aid services for consulting firm services for the financial aid compliance review. Oh, Dr. Field.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mr. Chairman. I believe all of you remember when we talked a few months ago about the program review that the Title IV Department of Education came in and did for us, or some would say to us, that looked at the records that we had from 6-7 years ago. And that financial aid review, that program review did not go well, as you are aware, and we are looking at the consequences of that. And we don't know what those consequences are completely yet because we haven't gotten the final report from the Department of Ed. We have been told that some places have waited years to get this final report, so we don't know whether to tell you, like they're saying now, that it will be sometime in the first quarter or sometime years down the road, because people are still waiting for these reports to be summed up, like I said, years later. But in the meantime, one of the concerns that I have, and as I shared this with others on the college staff, is our compliance. As you all are all aware, financial aid is an extraordinarily complex action on a college campus, and it changes every year. And those changes are as complex as the rules themselves. So we've had 2 audits now that have not reflected well, and both of those audits have been prior to our current staff being in place. But one of the things that I'm hoping that we can do, and that we've already discussed with you, is to bring on an outside agency to do a compliance check. And that outside agency is referenced in what you have in front of you. That's Financial Aid Services, which is a company out of Atlanta, Georgia. And they have a representative of their company that's ready to help us with this. And what this person will do is he will pull between 75 and 100 records from the current set of students that we have. And he'll make sure that we've fixed all of those errors that we made 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. And so I think we'll all feel a little better moving forward once they've done that. And so that's what we're asking for tonight, is for you to approve the use of money that we talked about prior to this, to hire the Financial Aid Services Corporation, who will in turn subcontract with someone who will be able to directly review our files for a cost of about $125 per hour. I think this will be done in between 2 and 3 weeks, which would probably run us between just under $15,000, but I want to give us a little bit of leeway there in case it takes a little longer for some reason. And the actual recommendation says approve funding for contingency not to exceed $18,000 for the financial aid services consultant. And that's what our recommendation is, that you approve the expenditure of that up to $18,000.
All right.
Right, do you, when you said that concern relates to what you're saying in our current operating environment?
I have two things that concern me. One is the fact that we have this report looming over our heads. And now we've had 2 reports that have been fairly critical of our actions. Again, that's quite a while back. But one of the things that I've seen happen in the past is that if a college is forthcoming and they want to go and fix these things quickly and they can show that they've done that, sometimes the aftermath of a report like this is a little bit less stringent. So that's one that I would like to put. I just want this to be in the hopper so we can tell the feds, we've already looked at this and our current records are fine. The second thing is, I just want to make sure that we're not missing anything. Again, it's very complex and I just want to make sure with an outside agency that we can look at that.
But based upon your, probably by this time, considerable amount of conversation with others that have been down this trail that no one wants to go down. But, what do you consider to be best case, worst case, coming out of that final audit report when it does arrive?
Worst case, and this is what the folks who did the review actually said, is that they would like us to review all the records from those 2 years, recalculate the financial aid, and make up the difference, if there's any difference to be made up. Now, that's also what they said in the last core audit that we had, and that's not what happened. We were allowed to basically take a certain number of those files, extrapolate that information, and go forward with that extrapolation. That's what I'm hoping for this time. And I mean, even if they would say you have to do 500 of them, that's a lot different than 12 to 16,000.
Well, it seemed to me if you're able to say we spent 18 grand and we took a good independent look at ourselves and we were good or we weren't so good, but we fixed it and we didn't wait for anyone to tell us to do that. That probably could play into
My thought exactly. That's exactly my thought.
Yeah.
Now, the good thing about this company is they can, let's say we do have to go and do a certain number of those files and prove to the feds that we're up to speed on everything now, or prove that we weren't back then, and they want us to make up the difference in the money. The same company that will provide this compliance person will also provide us extra staff to go through those files, because we don't have the staff to do that at this point. It would take us years to be able to do that at this point. And so it would be nice to have the same company looking at both ends of that spectrum. And so because if the compliance check goes in first, like we're hoping it can start very soon, then that person could actually be able to help those others that will come later in working with us, and that'll probably speed up the process.
But David, the other thing I want to point out is they admitted in the exit interview that they had not looked at the 2020 audit, which is where we corrected many of these things.
That's correct.
And they certainly haven't seen this one, which we intend to get to them. So they sort of intimated that that could have an effect, but it wasn't their decision.
Yeah.
You know, someone else would be looking at that. So we hope to get that to them. And then Philip and I have to make a phone call to Washington.
I think you remember, generally, if they don't want to take away our financial aid, they don't want to take away our financial aid funds. They don't want to put us in a bind because they want us to keep serving students. So we're trying to do everything we can do at this point to show them we're correcting these issues. We have corrected these issues now. And so I think, if you wanted to be nice to us, we will let you. Kind of, that kind of thing.
I think I have to favor your recommendation. You've thought about it a lot more than we have.
You bet. And I'll keep my fingers crossed that they appreciate this gesture.
Jerry, you moved to approve it?
Yes.
Okay, Jerry Stone made motion to approve it. Mike seconds that motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 19, Dr. Jerry, you want to talk about personnel updates?
Personnel update, yes, you can look through the list there. We have the typical resignations and new hires and reclassifications. The rehires are basically, we have all rehires except for one person that we hired that put in the budget early on for communication and social media coordinator. Anybody have any questions? I'll be happy to answer them.
Just one, Dr. King, and that's the.
If not, we'd ask for approval.
And social media coordinator. Is that something we built into the plan for this year?
Correct.
Okay,
You
good.
approved that earlier in the year.
Good, fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, it is. That's something we built into the budget and we built into the SIM plan that we've been following.
All right, do I hear a motion? We approve the personnel updates. Terry makes a motion. Jerry Stone seconds the motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We decided not to convene to executive session tonight. Dr. Jerry, there's something I have to do on that.
No.
Because you'd have to have a motion to go in.
Huh?
You'd have to have a motion to go in.
Yeah,
We just don't
okay.
take any action to go in.
All right, so that brings us down to item number 16 on the agenda, and that's Dr. Charlie's action.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Everybody needs to have a thought.
There we go. There we go.
That's good.
Thank you all, and have a good night.